Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. This is your host, Julia, and today I'm so excited to introduce Meg St. Esprit to you. Meg is a mom, she has 4 children, and she's also a storyteller. She is a journalist of the human experience, and she's written about all sorts of topics, but one of the topics she speaks to frequently, both in her writing and speaking engagements, is about adoption and about open adoption. In her family, both sets of kids came through open adoption. She has 4 children, and of those 4 children, they're 2 biological sibling sets. We talk in this episode quite a bit about the experience of open adoption and navigating the relationships between all the different family members that are related and not related to her children. And it's a very interesting and complicated dynamic to hold all that interwoven relationships, those interwoven emotions and experiences. In fact, Meg shared a quote with me that I just can't get out of my head and I'd like to share with you. I believe it came from one of the educational conferences she attended about adoption in which she was a speaker. And she shared with me, "Another woman's child calls me mom." Think of the depth of that. And there's no word that better articulates this than depth. There's depth to that. There's complexity, there's joy, there's pain, there's loss, there's sadness. And most of all, there's love. And so I love this quote because it acknowledges the trifecta of the adoption experience. It's not simply the adoptive parent or parents. It is also the child. It honors the child and it honors the biological family, the first parent, the first mom, the person who says, "I love my child so much that I'm going to ask you to parent them." And we have not even begun to unravel the complexities of adoption in this podcast. We have tried our best at Stork'd to share a bunch of different stories that can help us better understand the complexity and nuances of adoption. But this particular story captures so much about the adoption experience. And I really appreciate Meg's vulnerability, her honesty, her ability to share a lot of insights and nuances about being a parent to 4 children, some of whom have a little extra need from her. Here's a wonderful episode about adoption, about love, about complex family dynamics. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you love it as much as I do, please share with a friend. You never know who could benefit from a Stork'd story. Be sure to give us a review, like us on social media, follow Meg for her brilliant writing, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways people build and define family. Meg, I am so excited to have this conversation with you today. We have a lot to talk about and a lot to dive into. But before we do, if you could just give everyone a little overview as to who you are.
Sure. I'm Meg St. Esprit. I'm a journalist in Pittsburgh. We have 4 kids via adoption. Eli is 10, Ezra and Naomi are 8, and Nara is almost 4. So we built our family solely via adoption, no biological kids. And our adoptions are open adoptions as well. So I'm excited to talk about us.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think your story is so interesting because of the emphasis you just placed on open adoptions, because it's 4 children. 4 children is a lot of kids, no matter how they come into your life. But also each one of them has a unique story as to how you connected with them and how your family was built as a whole. So why don't we talk through the tapestry of how you created this family, or how the family created itself, I should say.
Sure. So I think, it's funny when my mom looks back and talks about me as a kid, other friends were like stuffing Kleenexes in their Barbies dresses to make them pregnant. And I was making my Barbies adopt. And so I think, and that's not to glorify adoption, which is a really difficult layered thing, but I think it was just something that kind of, I was always maybe geared towards. And maybe that was, God's way or the universe's way of like preparing me for this journey. So when we first got married, we talked even when dating about adopting. And so when we had a very brief blip with infertility, I mean, I knew that it was probably on the radar, just given other things in my past and my mom's past. She had a really difficult journey to conceive as well. We both really were just like, well, you know what? Like we always wanted to adopt anyways. So like, we're not going to do any major invasive really, we did nothing. As soon as we were referred to infertility specialist, we filled out our adoption application. It just felt like if we already planned to do it, why not just avoid that rigmarole, that circus, and just adopt?
Yeah.
So,
and that's, I think, interesting because so many of my guests say, we went through this difficult, complicated, intensive fertility journey and it landed us in adoption. And when I've had guests who have been adopted, who are grown adults, whose families have grown through adoption, some of them say, I always knew that I was maybe a second choice. And yet your story is a little different. How does what I say just resonate with the familiarity you have about the adoption community?
Yeah, I think that's really common, particularly with families that have no biological kids. I mean, we have a lot of friends that have biological kids and have fostered and adopted or adopted internationally. And so for them, it was always a both and, but there's definitely the families where it was a first then, and I feel like for me, particularly, I think knowing, how hard it was for my mom to go through a really long infertility journey, it just was never something I wanted for myself. And I really think, so before we had kids, to backtrack a little bit, I was a caseworker for the state of Pennsylvania, and I worked with many types of families. And it just, to me, all felt like a really valid way to make a family. And so it never felt like a consolation prize or a plan B or, if this doesn't work, then we'll do this. It just felt like, okay, like we want to do this. We feel informed about it. We feel equipped for, kids from hard places who might have hard things going on. So why not? And to be honest, I almost feel like our journey with trying to conceive felt like a little like, oh, I have to do this because society expects me to, because people don't just adopt without ever trying to conceive. And it's funny because I actually do have friends now that straight up, like from the time they got engaged, were like, we are never going to try to conceive. We only want to adopt. And so I do realize those people exist, but for us, it was just a blip onto this journey,
That's really interesting. And I've got a question that's starting to form around sitting in the in-between space between being informed and equipped, celebrating adoption stories and celebrating your adoption story in particular, and also not glorifying adoption. So on one hand, you are this person who speaks to others about what adoption can mean with a lot of data and information and I dare say even a trauma-informed lens. And yet you're saying, I don't want to glorify adoption. How do I understand the difference between celebration and glorification?
Yeah, that has taken me a while to get to, because when we think back on the formative experiences we had around adoption, as kids, I think of, this is funny, but TLC, A Baby Story, was a show that was really popular. Yeah. And the adoption episodes, first of all, they always really got me. They always made me emotional, but they were solely about the parents getting a baby. And I think it really, through my work as a caseworker, helped me to understand that like adoption should really be about finding a family for a kid that needs one. And, people will say our kids are lucky, and it's not lucky to have your first family not be able to raise you. It's profoundly unlucky. I mean, we're lucky. We're very lucky to get to raise these amazing kids, but adoption is a trauma. Like even, our kids came to us as infants, which was not what we specified or planned, but that's just what worked out. And so people will act like they don't have trauma. If you've been pregnant and birthed a baby, you're bonded to that baby from the second they're born. And so being separated from that is absolutely a trauma. And so I think we've really walked a fine line with our kids of saying like, we're so grateful you're here. And it's okay if you don't feel grateful you're here. Yeah. Or if you have moments that you do and moments that you don't, that's all valid.
That's a really hard conversation to have. And it's interesting. I had forgotten the baby story, but let's talk about that for a second, because it is a really good metaphor for the way we have previously seen adoption, because A Baby Story on TLC was in the context of all of those home renovation, life renovation stories, where the architecture was the same, regardless of what the narrative was. And the beginning was always something is broken. And the end is there was some sort of amazing, miraculous renovation or resolution. And with families, it was a baby fixes it. And an adopted baby fixes your family, which is great for the family, but maybe not great for the kid.
And not great for the parents on the other end.
Yeah.
I mean, for them to either, the one that sticks out to me is a plane arriving from some country and they were handed their baby. For the family on the other end of that plane, I mean, they were completely invisible. And it was a devastating moment for them. I mean, sure, my kids' first moms have said at times it was empowering for them to be able to choose safety for their kids, but also devastating. And so I don't want to take away the power of that choice that they were free to make, to birth or not birth, to parent or not parent. But yeah, that show, you're right. It was just like, something's broken. Here's the baby. Now it's better.
Yeah.
And none of the context was there. It was a really unhealthy view. I think we've begun to do better. I think This Is Us has done better. There's been a couple other movies about foster care and adoption that have done a little bit better. We're starting to see that it's more complex, but we need to listen to adult adoptees a lot more to fully get the picture.
So I don't want to put too much undue pressure on this interview and your voice, because that's totally unfair. But one of the things that we do at Stork'd is we try to showcase all of the perspectives of adoption so that you can hear the nuances. And you have a lot of nuance, which I jumped over. Let's go back. Can you tell us a little bit about weaving your family together in the way that you have? And if you could emphasize a little bit the question of choice, because it's really important in today's political backdrop.
Right. So when we first applied to adopt, we were open to a private infant adoption or a foster care adoption. And I mean, we were the whole time through all 4 kids. So the fact that we ended up with 4 infants is extremely unusual. Absolutely. So it's funny, the day we finished our home study, the first time, our caseworker told us about, there's this mom, she's really specific about what she wants. And I'm not going to get into her specifics, but she had just an XYZ list of what she wanted in an adoptive family. And she's like, I just read it and thought, that's you guys. And so we were like, absolutely, we will meet with her. We will hang out. And through the course of waiting to meet with her, because, she wanted to be closer to delivery, I think, until kind of meeting with families, we were open to several foster care situations, sibling sets, etc. We said yes to most of them, but we ultimately were not picked. And so it kind of brought us to the decision field, her decision field of when she met with us, that we had not been chosen for anything else. And she ended up deciding she wanted to place our oldest, Eli, with us. And so we were there, I mean, the day he was born, again, which is not anything we expected or asked for or demanded. We were fine with whatever space she needed. It was a gift and a privilege. And I mean, again, I don't want to be too personal with either of our kids' moms' decisions, but the decision to have a child is very separate. I feel like there's this decision of like, do I want to have a child or not? And then do I want a parent or not? And those are completely separate decisions.
I appreciate you making that distinction. Yeah. And then there's a third decision too, which is, what's the relationship I hope to have with my child going forward?
Absolutely. And I know that is one of the reasons we were chosen for our oldest, is because she had a pretty quote unquote heavy visitation schedule she wanted. It didn't feel heavy to us, but I guess to some other families, maybe it was. And I don't remember what it was because now we're just very organic, but I feel like it was like 4 times a year, which, we've ebbed and flowed through life and the pandemic and everything, but some years it's been much more, some years it's been much less. And so, yeah, I mean, her wanting to be involved was never a negative for us. I think I saw it as, yes, we can do this. We can check this list. That matters. And I didn't realize that we would just all become family. And so I think that was kind of what surprised me.
Okay. I think that sentence is really powerful and really intriguing. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah. Just, I guess, for a little background. So our 10-year-old and our 3-year-old are biological siblings. So they have the same birth mother. And then our twins obviously have the same birth mother. So we have 2 other moms in our kids' lives. And then extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, birth dads, all of that are maybe less heavily involved, but are within our circle. So, I mean, for us at first, it was like, sure, we'll meet with you. This has been shown to be good for kids. We've seen the statistics. We know that adult adoptees would prefer open adoption. Check that list as inexperienced people with no children. And I think over time, we just realized we enjoyed it too. I mean, seeing our kids with their other siblings that are not with us. All of our kids have siblings, different numbers, different ages that are not in our home. Seeing them with cousins, seeing them with their first moms, seeing them with their grandmothers, aunts and uncles. I mean, to us, it almost feels like, and I fully admit that if someone has not been in an open adoption, that this might sound like, I hate to use the word threat, but I do think some people think that, like a threat against your parenthood and your role, but it has never felt like that. And I won't say it's always been easy. There's absolutely been really hard decision grounds and really difficult things to navigate. But to me, it doesn't feel any different than our extended family across the country that just love and care for our kids. I mean, they wanted so much what was best for their kids that they chose to actually not be with them. And so I've never doubted for a second that they have their best interests at heart.
And yet we go back to the glorification, the way you're describing this wild, jumbled tapestry. I keep going back to the word tapestry for you for some reason.
It is. No, it's a perfect word, I think.
Like just complicated, big family dynamics. It's a lot to navigate. And I bet there's a lot of personalities and emotions involved. And yet to hear you speak about it, it sounds joyful. It sounds easy. It sounds like, oh yeah, of course we have this big, huge family. Can you help me understand the open adoption thing a little bit better? If I were to enter open adoption as a first-time parent of an adopted child, how do I think about it? How do I approach it? How do I structure myself? What do I do?
Yeah, I mean it, and I will admit I'm a positive person by nature, and I'm also couching, some of the difficult things that have come up, absolutely, because those are my kids' private stories. But every family relationship is messy. Every family relationship has conflict. That, to me, saying like we're all one big family includes all of that. I've fought with my siblings. I've had periods of time where I don't talk to a cousin or a parent or, because of conflict, or I've had times where people needed time away to get well, to be in the right headspace, to be in relationship. And I don't think any of that has been different in open adoption. And I know people might say, well, all your kids came as babies, they weren't removed. Even though, again, we were licensed foster parents. But I have many friends whose kids were removed, whose kids were adopted at 4, 5, 6 years old, who have very similar circumstances to what we have now. And I think it really takes a laying aside of self and self-interest to look at the kids and think what is best for them is to know all of it, the good, the bad, the messy, all of it. We have hard questions about why they needed to be adopted, or did they need to be adopted, which some of that's societal. I mean, racism, poverty, a lot of that. There are better ways to fix it than removing kids, but we're not there yet as a society. And so, yeah, it's not always been sunshine and rainbows. We've had a big thing this week where 2 of my kids are fighting about, are we either real parents or not? And one of them is very hung up on the word real and its literal meaning. And the other one is like, well, they're all real. None of them are fake. And so it's, we're not robots. And we've kind of joked about that. Well, yeah, we're all real people, but it's different for our 2 kids and how they're interpreting it. And they've battled about it.
What's the battle for you? I mean, when you hear the word real defined differently from the voices of 2 different children, does it evoke something in you? Do you feel?
I think it would have maybe 5 years ago. I think now, seeing that one of my kids, the kid that is latching onto the word real, is extremely literal in all areas of their life, that no, it's just how they're interpreting things. And so it's whatever, like they're so completely obsessed with me and hanging on me all the time and loving me and cuddling me. And so to me, I'm still one of their real moms. They have another real mom, And then for the other one, they're very upset by the fact that someone is saying I might not be real. But I've just told them, when I hug you, does it feel real? When I snuggle you, does it feel real? Well, then all that matters is how it feels to you. And we're about to have a visit with that child's mom next weekend. And I'm like, and it's going to feel the same when she hugs you, when she snuggles you. And because we are both real, and you don't need to worry about what feels different for your sibling and what feels different for you. because you're different people.
I like that definition of real. How does it feel, to take it into the body, embodied experience, and make it, I hate to use this word, make it real, make it tangible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember, it's funny, with our first, at some point, someone asked me like, how's their mom doing? And I knew what they meant. They meant their birth mom. And I bristled and I was like, well, I'm their mom, and then, but now I'm like, well, I would not bristle at that now. And I even say, I interchangeably use your mom, your birth mom, your first mom, and realize like, it's more about how it feels than the words, I think.
Yeah. How it feels in the words. I think people really get hung up on finding the right language choices. If I were to get to know you as a friend and I wanted to hear how you were doing and how each one of your kids were doing and how all the various members of the family were doing, what are some of the terminology that I should use? And what's the right way to ask the questions?
So, I mean, for us, I think most of the people in our closest circle just know our kids' first mom's names, but other families are more private with that, and that's okay. Our kids are not. I've let all of their teachers know who XYZ is because they will talk about them openly.
Yeah.
My brother so-and-so who is not who showed up at open house. And so they need to know who that is. We very interchangeably use birth mom, first mom, mama so-and-so. Two of my kids use mama so-and-so for their birth mom, and two use tummy mommy, which is one that is very contested in the adoption community because some people say it does reduce people to just kind of like a gestation, just a person that gestates. But however, my kiddo that latched onto it early, their birth mom loves it. And so it's not for me to say, oh no, this is not acceptable, because they love it. Yeah. So I think that for us, it all works. I mean, we use brother and sister. We don't say birth brother, birth sister. We use it all together. One funny thing is that my kids call the other kids' biological siblings also their brothers and sisters.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, they're aware that they're not biologically their brothers and sisters, but at the same time, our four kids are not biologically brother and sister to each other. So I don't think it feels different to them. And I feel like it's up to our kids to define, even my kids will call my best friends' kids their cousins, and they're not their cousins. But then we've been best friends for almost 40 years. And they know that it's my best friend's kids. They know that she's not my sister, but family for them has become such a thing they've chosen. It's not really up to me to define that, I guess, for them, so they're their cousins. I mean, that's fine.
I grew up that way too, where some of our neighbors or best friends' kids were cousins and still are. Yeah. Right. I still celebrate their birthdays as though they were my first friends, the people that I knew at like age birth. Wow. Okay. So this is really interesting. You're giving a lot of agency to children to define family for themselves. And one of the questions I ask, and will ask you later, is how do you personally define family? But what I love is that you're saying it's not up to me to choose that for my kids. They get to choose that, which is really cool. I haven't heard that before. So tell me a little bit about, how did it come to be that you ended up with two sibling sets?
Yeah.
If I'm understanding you correctly.
Right. So after we adopted our oldest, when he was, I want to say around a year, I spoke on an adoptive parent panel, and that was the first time I saw our caseworker, since the finalization. And I said to her, like, we would like to adopt again. We would really like a sibling set. We think that would, complete our family. And she was like, well, the paperwork, whatever, is really long and intensive to get recertified. So, maybe just start now. And we were like, that's fine, and we're in no rush. We have a 1-year-old. We were both working. And we wanted him to stay the oldest. So, I mean, a sibling set younger than a 1-year-old, obviously, is going to take a while. So we completed all the paperwork, et cetera. And I remember kind of like, his adoption was really fast. Like I said, it was like the day we were approved. And I remember saying like to my husband, like, there's no way we're going to be blessed again that fast. It was to the day, literally, I don't remember the number of days, 43 days or something, that we were told about our twins who were in another state. They were not yet born, but were expected to have some significant medical needs. And so they were looking for a family that felt like they could handle that. And so at that point, I was a developmental specialist for special needs infants and toddlers. My husband's a therapist for kids. And so through the network of caseworkers, our agency, whatever, they reached out to us and said, we know you were thinking like a sibling set of kids that were not newborns, but there are these babies. And so we did go meet with their mom and we just, hit it off right away. And she actually wanted me to be in the C-section, but it didn't work out that way because of the distance. We arrived in the city where they were born, I think when they were maybe 2 hours old. First I went into recovery to talk to her. And this is a moment I always remember. And this is probably one of the moments that is very personal that I will share, is that she had a wristband for a significant other that could let them in to see the babies. And she gave it to me. And so we were actually able to spend their whole week in the hospital, seeing them with her, in conjunction as much as we wanted to or needed to, which was nothing that we had expected. And so we felt pretty complete. We had 3 kids under 3. They were born the day before my oldest turned 2. So their birthdays are a day apart, 2 years apart. And then when they were almost 5 and almost 7, we were contacted by our oldest's mom about her pregnancy, that she had decided that she was not going to parent. And she was pretty far along. And so we had felt that we were complete on officially, but I also felt a little bit like something was missing at the same time. And I don't want to say, someone else's baby is what was missing, but at the same time, like I do believe in, I am a religious person and I believe in agency over the universe and God and, him or her working to weave things together. And so our youngest ended up coming home to us just a few weeks after that call. And then, so she is pretty much 5 and 8 years younger than, or 5 and 7 years younger than our oldest 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always chalk that up to intuition, right? It's not this sense that, oh, I need something to be complete. Right. And particularly not, I need your child to complete me. But on a gut level, I just feel like there's something going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. Like there was things I just didn't. It's funny. I got rid of almost all of our quote unquote, like boy themed clothes. And now my youngest she's super like morbid and loves like all types of Halloween clothes and dark and black clothes. And she's a very funny little 3-year-old, but I got rid of most of those clothes from my sons, but hung on to more from my older daughter. And it's just funny. Yeah. It's like my mama heart just knew like not everyone was here.
Oh my God. I love that. I just got like chills, mama heart, your mama heart. I love that.
Yeah. And just the value of, we have friends that are biological siblings. And so they were the only 2 biological connected people in our household, because my husband and I are not. And then my oldest was not. And seeing him with his younger biological sister has been huge for him. They look just alike. They act just alike. They're very similar. And at the same time, they're all very close in different ways. The situation, such as it was, is that it wasn't that she was going to parent or place her with us. It was that she was not going to parent. So she was going to place her with us or with someone else. And so keeping them together was extremely important to us.
If your mama heart hadn't been saying there might be something else coming and you had said, I think I'm maxed out at capacity, how would you have navigated that child being placed somewhere else? Or would you have said, I've got to push through and make sure that this child is with her sibling?
I don't think we would have pushed through in a way that was detrimental to the kids that we had, because I think, and again, that comes up a lot right now in the current discourse, you need to do justice to the kids you have as well and what you can handle. There was a brief, maybe a week period where we kind of talked about my brother's family or a very dear friend's family, just as we tried to kind of figure out. So that was the year that all of my kids were going to be in full-time school. And so that was a really big shift for us. I was about to go back to work full-time. And I did end up anyways, just with help and daycare and whatnot. But we did kind of look at who is tangential to us that could still be within our circle to still keep them together. And then if it had been strangers, we really hoped it was someone that wanted to stay in touch with us. But I think from the go, we both really felt like she was intended to be here. And so those conversations were kind of peripheral, I think.
Sure. Such a hard theoretical question. What if, and so I apologize for that one.
No, and it's right, because now I can't imagine, like, my goodness, she's absolutely our little exclamation point that like completes our family. But like, I can't, but I know at the time it was all of a sudden like, hey, do you want a baby? Like it's a lot. And I tell her all the time, you surprised us, you know, and that's okay. Like, that doesn't mean that she wasn't very, very wanted.
Yeah.
Just that it was a surprise.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you've said something at the beginning, and the word just keeps getting stuck in the back of my head. And that's that you felt equipped to take on adoption specifically, but also it sounds like you were equipped to take on special needs children. What does it mean to be equipped to take on kids that are either adopted or special needs or both?
I mean, so we both have masters in education. We both are therapists by education. My husband is licensed and practicing. I've switched to journalism, but for nearly a decade, I worked with kids with disabilities, and our kids have a variety of different needs, disabilities. All kids that are adopted have trauma. So we're both trained in trauma parenting and trauma focused care. There's sometimes this trope in adoption that like, oh my gosh, there's this really sad story of this kid and you should just open up your home and be okay with it. But like, no, you need to be prepared for what that child has going on, ensure that you can handle it. And I think our agency did a good job of it, but I think some do not. And so we did feel really equipped. And there's daily, I feel not equipped when things are hard. I think yeah, right. Yeah. Are any of us equipped to parent day to day? But I think at the outset, we felt like, okay, we kind of have this toolbox that maybe other people are not lucky enough to have. And so we can maybe navigate some of these needs a little better. And we did. I mean, our twins needed physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, vision therapy. And like, just because of the field I was in, I cherry picked all their therapists. And I don't regret it because they did amazing. They said one of my 8-year-olds was not going to walk unassisted, and she rides horses and runs and swims, and some of that is just the medical community was wrong, but a lot of that is the amazing practitioners that were in her life. And so we definitely kind of had a handle on that.
I was almost thinking about it like the reverse. So you approached it with, to be equipped, you need to be aware, and that you shouldn't open your house if you're not aware that this is the right choice for your family. And I absolutely see the value in that. On the other hand, what I'm hearing is that you have a lot of specialized training that most intended parents don't have. So should I or a listener be gun shy or anxious about taking on a special needs kid if we don't have the specialized training that you have? Or are there things that we should be doing to prepare ourselves?
I mean, I don't think that you should not open your home. I just think you need to understand that it's going to radically shift what your home's going to look like. I mean, people are going to be in and out a lot. And you're going to have to really advocate for your child in a world that is not super friendly to kids with disabilities. And I would add right into here, we're a multiracial family. 2 of our kids are Black, 2 are white. And the same applies. Like, again, that mama bear, like I've used my white privilege to fight for my Black kids constantly in a way that Black moms don't usually get listened to. And so I think that it's just being aware that if you're going to change the dynamic of your family significantly, you need to be prepared for what comes with that, which is a commitment to, I guess, a reality that is different than maybe what you experienced before, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
Well, and there was, I guess, just for an example, there was one kiddo that we were considered for. And in the process of, we had said, yes, like we would be open to parenting her. And this was, our oldest was, again, 18 months or so at the time. And then in the process of us talking to the caseworker, et cetera, she ended up having several strokes and ending up on a ventilator with a trach. And we just knew, with a 18-month-old and living at that time, now we live in the city, but at that time we lived in the middle of nowhere, far from hospitals. We knew that we were not the best choice for her. And she's with a great family and she's thriving now. And we actually were lucky enough to get to know that. But I think it was okay for us to say, like, us with a toddler in the middle of the country is not a great place for this really medically fragile child. And I think that parents need to not have shame in that. I have another friend who was very open to transracial adoption, but knew that her extended family and their community would probably not be, and they were not in a financial place to leave there. And so they decided to not be open to transracial adoption. And I think some people might say, oh, that's so racist. But I'm like, well, no, they didn't put that kid in a situation where they were going to be harmed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm sad they live in a community like that, but also glad they could recognize it, I guess.
So it sounds like there's a requirement for deep self-awareness in saying yes to placements.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to do it because, again, adoption is about finding families for kids. So you want to find the family for the kid that is right for them.
Right.
Not about finding kids for people that want kids.
Right. But that narrative is shifting backwards again. So, okay. So we've been circling around the advocacy question a little bit. And you mentioned that you're using your white privilege to advocate for your Black children and all of your children. I want to hear a little bit more about how you think about advocating for your kids with their special needs, and how does one go about making sure that kids have what resources they should have?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of a relentless, I don't want to say battle, but sometimes, and I will say our school has been really great with us. And I have had parents of color tell me that your kids of color get more services than our kids. And they're not wrong. And again, I think our school is trying, but I think there's an inherent desire to listen to me more, than that mom. And I'm working hard to try to correct that. When parents tell me that, I'm trying to get them in the room, get them in the conversation. I fail at it miserably all the time because I'm overwhelmed and at my max, just with my kids and my job and our household, but I'm trying. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things you don't think about, just insurance authorizations and things that have to be done in person. And, just before we got on the phone, I got a call that said one of my kids hasn't seen their psychiatrist in X months. And so they're not going to refill their medication until we get down there. And I'm like, why did nobody tell me before it was too late? And I know that they're overwhelmed as well, because there's not enough mental health professionals right now for the collective trauma we've just been through as a society.
That's just it, right? We live right now in this post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, whatever you want to call it, world, depending on your viewpoint. We're either post-pandemic or still in the middle of it. But regardless of that, there has been a significant drain on our resources, our medical resources and our psychiatric resources. And so to advocate for kids who have trauma, adoption trauma, or special needs in the context of providers who are burnt out or unavailable is tricky. Any tips or tricks for those people who are in the trenches trying to take care of their kids' needs?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I've seen it from the other side. I mean, my husband is a therapist for middle and high school kids and has a wait list. And then we just through the course of, I would say the heart of the pandemic, because I don't think it's necessarily over, but through the lockdown phase and, the first bit, we went through multiple therapists. And then we had one kiddo that would not talk on camera to anyone. And so they just flat out lost services. And then we ended up with someone that would meet outside when it was nice. Now we're into a more regular pattern of therapy, but it takes a lot of ingenuity. I think for adoptive families, I know reaching out to our adoption agency was huge because they have, particularly in Pennsylvania, there's a statewide post-permanency network that has a lot of resources for kids that were adopted in the past. I don't know about other states.
Well, let's go back to adoption. You mentioned that one of your kids you got connected to as a result of having spoken on a panel. And I know that you are a voice for adoption in general. You do a lot of panels. What are some of the key messages you want somebody to hear this episode and walk away with from having heard your story?
I think the biggest thing for me, and we kind of touched on it early, is please don't let kids feel like they were a plan B. I mean, even if you had a long infertility journey, or even if you had bio kids first and then decided to adopt, and I hear people say had our own kids first, because they're all your own kids. Once a judge says they're your kids, they're your kids. Just let your kids know that, there was a journey to get to them, but you're glad they're there. But also leaving space for them to have those times when they're maybe not glad they're there. I mean, my Black kids have said they wish they had Black parents, and probably life would be less complicated for them if they did. And so I can hear that and see that and not be hurt by that. And so I do think you need to shift your lens to a child-centered focus, which is always good, no matter where your kids come from.
I'm hearing this, like, I'm trying to find the words for it. Maybe you can help me. It's almost like what you aim for in meditation, to be the middle way, not to be shoved around by your emotions, that your kids are throwing these big things at you.
Yeah.
You're not real. I wish you were a different race. And you seem to be just like, yep. How do you get comfortable with that for yourself? Do you meditate? Do you have tools or resources? Do you have a support group or books that you turn to? Like, how does one get comfortable with all this heavy stuff?
I mean, I don't meditate. So we come from a Christian background. I definitely pray about it. I definitely have a really good support system of adoptive moms who, if I say, hey, my kid said this, they're like, oh yeah, my kid said that. And so it makes me realize it's not something to like pathologize, but something that is very normal. I think listening to adult adoptees is super important because they can say, yes, I thought this and felt this. And some might say, and I'm still close to my adoptive parents. And others might say, and I'm not, but I have friends that are not close to their biological parents. And so that's not abnormal. There's definitely I think a dying to self. And I think the biggest thing, and I've said it a couple of times, but was the radical shift for me realizing that adoption is about finding families for kids and not finding kids for people. And so when I realized that, it's that my kids are, they're the only ones in this triad that had no say in the matter. And so they're allowed to feel about it however they feel. And yeah, there's moments when they say that where I'm like, oh my gosh, I stayed up with you for hours and hours while you were colicky and this and that. And then I have to remind myself like, okay, but you wanted to have babies. You wanted to be a parent. You signed up for that. And so they're entitled to feel how they feel. And we still love each other. And they're thankfully very bonded to us. Some adopted kids do have trouble bonding. That's normal as well. But we're overall like very lucky parents with like 4 amazing kids that have been through some hard stuff. And so it can't be about us,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I alluded to this question. It's coming.
Oh no.
After 4 kids and as an advocate in the adoption community, how do you define family?
It's funny. We have a sign on our wall and it sounds simplistic, but it says love makes a family. And obviously that's loaded, but I do think that. I really do. I mean, we love our kids. They love us. Our extended family loves them. Our friends love them. Their first families love them. And so I think family is what you make it. Family is what you choose. I mean, there's absolutely been people we have cut out along this journey who were not healthy for our kids, particularly around the issue of race. I'm not going to let you be a racist and be in my kid's life. I don't care if you're my, great aunt, whatever.
Wow.
And so families is absolutely who you choose. Like it is so much more than blood, so much more than biology, so much more than paperwork or what a judge says. It's all of it. It's who's there for you and who supports you and who lets you be your authentic self, even if that authentic self grates against their authentic self. My siblings and I are super different. And it's hard, especially in today's climate, to be super different. But yeah, family's what you make it, and love makes a family. I do think that.
That's great. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you really want to make sure is shared?
I guess if we're wrapping up, I would just really like to reiterate, if someone is considering adoption or is an adoptive family, like please listen to first mothers and please listen to adult adoptees because more than you listen to other adoptive parents, because those are the perspectives you need.
Yeah. And you can't speak for first parents, but you have had success in building relationships with first parents. Is there anything we should know about that?
I mean, they love their kids. Like the choice they made was a parenting decision made out of love. Like it was not a giving up. It was a choice that they were entitled to. And again, I know I'm speaking broadly because I know that there's some situations that are really heartbreaking, but I think by and large, even first parents who lost their kids to the system love their kids. And so I think we should always operate from that mindset that they care about them and they love them and they want good things for them.
I think that's so important. Where, Meg, can we find you if we're interested in learning more about either your story or your journalism or other adoption resources?
Yeah. So my website, it's megstesprit.com. So MEGSTESPRIT.com. And on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Meg St, spelled the same. I post a lot, mostly funny things my kids do. My 3-year-old today asked me when the undead are going to rise again. So, stuff like that. And then, on my website, I post not everything I write, but the things that stand out to me. I do a lot of more basic writing as well, just to pay the bills. But I loved interacting on social media. It's a good outlet, extroverted to a fault. So definitely find me there.
That's awesome. Extroverted to a fault works really well in this medium.
It does, for sure.
It definitely makes it a fun interview. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to connect and to hear about your beautiful family and the many ways that it came together. And you have a really incredible voice for this community. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a joy.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.
Many of you know that I use donor sperm to conceive my perfect little angel, and I absolutely credit his donor for, at least 50% of what makes him so special. I used California Cryobank to find the right donor for me. California Cryobank is a full-service sperm bank which specializes in frozen donor sperm, private semen analysis and cryopreservation, and directed donor services. California Cryobank has the largest and most diverse selection of sperm donors, which is really important when you're making this life-changing decision, such as who your child's DNA is going to be, what their genetic makeup can be. They make the selection process easier because, believe me, it can be an overwhelming process, and they make that process a lot easier with search filters and profiles that really help you make a great decision. The profiles that they provide include things like genetic test summaries, medical histories, personal essays, childhood and adult photos, and DNA ancestry reports, all of which are really helpful and a really important decision. Stork'd is excited to share a free Level 2 subscription to California Cryobank's donor catalog. By using the promo code STORK'd, STORKD, at cryobank.com, you will receive free access to that donor catalog for 90 days, which is a great value. It's a $145 value. Definitely encourage that you try it out, and good luck finding your donor.